Let me ask you something. Have you ever looked back at a decision you made and thought, how did I end up here? Not in a dramatic way, not one big catastrophic choice, but a series of small ones. A click, a signature, an agreement you didn't think mattered. And yet somehow those small yeses added up to a life, a belief, a habit, or even a situation you never consciously chose. That's not an accident, that's psychology. And today we're talking about one of the most powerful and least understood persuasion mechanisms ever discovered. The foot in the door technique. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why good people comply with bad systems, why freedom is rarely taken, it's given away, how governments, corporations, cults, and movements use this against us, and how you can use the same mechanism to build discipline, integrity, and real change without manipulation. Because the technique is neither good nor evil, it's a lever, and whoever controls it shapes behaviour. In 1966, psychologists Jonathan Friedman and Scott Fraser ran a simple experiment. They approached homeowners and asked them something harmless. Would you sign a petition today supporting road safety? No money, no effort, no risk. People said yes. A few weeks later, the researchers returned. Same houses, same people, but with a much larger request. Would you allow a large, ugly sign to be installed on your lawn? Big, obnoxious, impossible to ignore. Now here's the important part. The people who had not signed the petition, most said no. But the people who had said yes to that earlier tiny request, they agreed at dramatically higher rates. Not because the sign made sense, not because they were pressured, but because something had already changed. Not the situation, but their identity. They no longer thought, should I do this? They thought, I'm the kind of person who supports this. That's the real mechanism, not compliance, but self-definition. Your brain hates inconsistency. It would rather rewire your identity than admit contradiction. Once you act, the mind asks, what kind of person does that? And whatever answer it lands on becomes who you are, at least temporarily. This is driven by cognitive dissonance avoidance, self-perception theory, identity coherence. In simple terms, we don't think ourselves into action, we act ourselves into belief. And once belief forms, resistance feels uncomfortable. Have you noticed that? How saying no feels harder than it should. That's not weakness. That's the cost of consistency. The foot in the door technique works because it doesn't demand submission. It recruits the ego. Governments almost never begin with force. They begin with reasonable requests. Oh, just temporarily. Just to be safe. Just until further notice. Ask yourself this. Why are major policy shifts almost always introduced as voluntary? Because the first goal isn't enforcement, it's precedent. Once people comply willingly, even symbolically, resistance later feels irrational, extreme, or immoral. You're no longer being controlled externally, you're policing yourself. Let me be clear, this isn't about conspiracy, this is about behavioural compliance architecture. Systems don't need to crush dissent if they can train identity. And once identity shifts, the door is already open. Nowhere is this more visible than online. Think about it. No app asks for loyalty up front. They ask for one click, one email, one permission, one notification. That's it, and then another and another. Until your attention, habits, and time are no longer chosen. They are default. You didn't decide to be dependent. You just never decided to stop. That's the foot in the door at scale. Cults don't recruit with doctrine. They recruit with kindness, with help, with belonging, with small, reasonable requests. Come to dinner, read this, help us set up chairs. Nothing dangerous, nothing extreme. until one day saying no would mean rejecting who you've become. People don't fall into extremism, they walk into it, one step at a time. So here's what it looks like in the real world. Free trials that require card details just in case. Charity requests that start with signing a pledge. Workplace cultures that normalise unpaid small favours. Political movements that begin with symbolic gestures. Fitness programs that ask for 5 minutes, then your identity. Social causes that start with awareness, then demand obedience. Relationships where boundaries are crossed gradually, not suddenly. Each step alone feels harmless. Together they create momentum. Here's the ethical line. The technique becomes manipulation when the end goal is hidden, information is deliberately withheld, exit is punished socially or psychologically, consent is engineered, not informed. That's when influence becomes coercion, not through force, through architecture. And once momentum replaces choice, people mistake habit for belief. That's dangerous. Now here's the part most people miss. This technique can save lives. It's one of the most effective tools in addiction recovery, behaviour change, mental health, discipline building, moral courage. You don't ask someone to change their life. You ask them to do one small aligned action. One walk, one honest sentence, one day sober, one boundary. Action first, identity later. This is how people rebuild themselves, not through motivation, through sequence. Before you say yes to anything small, ask, what identity does this train? What does this make harder to refuse later? Is it reversible? Who benefits if I keep saying yes? Awareness doesn't make you immune, but it restores choice. Most people think freedom is lost in a single dramatic moment. It isn't. Freedom is lost or built, one small decision at a time. The foot in the door technique doesn't force you, it waits for you to open the door yourself. So the real question isn't who's trying to manipulate me, it's this. What am I practicing saying yes to, and who does that make me? Because every small yes is a vote, and sooner or later, you become the result.